Welcome to a new episode of the Creative Industry Insight podcast. I'm your host, Bobby. Today, we welcome makeup designer Ashleigh Chavis, who joins us to talk about their work on the Bikeriders. Ashleigh will talk us through the intricate detail required to create the various looks for the cast. Please be warned there are heavy spoilers in this episode. Now let's jump into the conversation with Ashleigh. Hi Ashleigh, thank you for joining me today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
I'm glad we can sit down and talk about the Bikeriders, which has come out recently. What can I say? Just what a lineup in the film. You can't go wrong with a Jeff Nichols film as well. And how have you found the reaction to the film?
Well, everything that I've heard on my end from people that I'm familiar with and my friends and family and coworkers have loved it. But what surprised me is even on social media, the people that I don't even know and I didn't even know were people that were familiar with my work have reached out to me just out of the blue and messaged me about how much they love the film and just love the style of it and how great they thought it was. So that's been really cool.
I think when you get that sort of recognition of people reaching out, I think that's probably it probably feels like a whole different level of sort of like not overwhelming feeling, but that sort of just like, wow, we obviously struck the right chords with people, and it's I don't know, it must feel like when you kind of like brush the dirt off your shoulder sort of thing, being like, yeah, we did a really good job.
It's been different. I mean, I knew I was proud of the film. I knew that I was, very proud of my team and what we all did, and all of the positive things that I took away from working with Jeff Nichols and the whole cast. But to have that resonate with an audience, a viewing audience, enough for them to actually say, I took time out of my life to go see this piece of art that you all created, and I just had to tell you how much I loved it. Yeah, that's definitely something that you don't take for granted.
And as well, like when it comes to like film and TV making, and or even when people work in a theater or just arts in general, it's like how much you put of yourself out there for then people to sort of either critique or compliment. I think that's always like a really, really big thing and interesting thing as well, because you're really putting yourself in a vulnerable position to be criticized or praised at the same time.
Yeah, very much. You kind of put these projects out into the world and hope for the best. You go through a lot mentally and emotionally and physically with the long hours and the cold nights and all of that, and you kind of hope everybody loves it as much as you do, but you really are vulnerable and you're publicly opening yourself up for criticism or for praise, and you kind of brace for impact. But at the same time, it's still, if you're still doing, creating art and doing stuff that you love, if it doesn't touch everybody the same way that it, touched your own heart, well, that's okay too. But when it does, it's pretty powerful.
100%. And I think as well, when it's more than sort of one person, it probably means even more because you just have that next sort of like it's not a anomaly that's you've done well. It's someone's like recognizing it and really getting into what you've done. And I guess as well with something like hair and makeup, in your case, makeup, sorry, it's like I think people will be quick to point out if it's something is wrong, and which is like it's very easy to do as an audience member or a critic because it, you're watching this on like what sometimes the biggest screens possible, so you can maybe pick something up, or there are people that go frame by frame to pick things up, and I guess if people go the other way, then that just makes it all the better.
Exactly. If we kind of tend to say in our, world of makeup and hair too, probably, if no one says anything, that's kind of a compliment for us. If no one is pointing out where there's a flaw or calling out a bad, continuity mistake with makeup, or then that's a good thing. So it's almost a good thing if you hear nothing, or obviously if people want to be complimentary, that's obviously great and appreciated. But being on a huge movie screen in a theater with shots close up of these actors, your work and your art is just in everybody's faces, and it's going to be something that people maybe that don't even really normally pay much attention to makeup would notice, and are definitely quick to post or say something or tweet about a mistake in makeup department. So having anyone either say good things or say nothing at all, that's kind of where you want it to sit. But it's a very vulnerable position that we just eagerly put ourselves into each time we work on a project.
And it's crazy as well, just to think that if somebody doesn't say something, you've done well. But that'd still put me on edge, just because I'd still want to know if I've done well. If no one says anything, because no news is good news. But back to the beginning, how did the project come about, and what made you want to take it on?
Well, I had done a project with actor Michael Shannon, called George and Tammy, which was a television series. And I was his personal makeup artist for that one. And he and I worked together on that series for about 5 months, just closely every day, got to know one another. And he was directing his first feature film that summer. And he gave me a call, I want to say probably about 2 months or so before they began prepping for his first feature film that he was directing, and asked me if I would be available to come and be the makeup department head for his movie, even though he wasn't going to be in it. And so I definitely jumped at that chance. I was grateful that he had that kind of trust in me and wanted me to come along with his journey for that project. And working on that movie, which was called Eric LaRue, I met a good friend of Michael's and one of his lead producers named Sarah Green. And Sarah, who I didn't know at the time, had produced all of Jeff Nichols' movies. And she was kind of in that Jeff Nichols world, same as Michael Shannon. They kind of were a part of every one of his projects so far. And Michael and Sarah had kind of been talking a little bit about the possibility of maybe having me come on board as the makeup department head for Bikeriders. And again, when it first came up, from Sarah talking to me about it, I didn't know what the job was, and I didn't even know that it was a Jeff Nichols movie. But she said, "Hey, we got this project coming up. When the timing would be right, we feel, if after we're done with this one, would you maybe want to roll into this next one?" And was interested. And when I was sent the script from them and I saw that it was written and it was going to be directed by Jeff Nichols, I was on board. I didn't even know what it was about yet, but I wanted to do it. I didn't know who the cast was or anything. So yeah, really Sarah and Michael were kind of the catalyst in getting me into that Jeff Nichols world.
I think there's sliding door moments of when you work with certain people and how it snowballs sometimes. With events, there's always like, I don't know, it's just something that you can never explain. How it's sort of like, oh yeah, if you do you want to come and look at this, do you want to do this? And then without sort of a second guess, you're like, yeah, sure, I'll have a look at it, and then realizing who it is. I think that's also another moment when the penny drops, where you think, oh my gosh, this is actually going to be huge.
Yeah, for sure. I knew I had loved all of Jeff Nichols' movies, that every one of them that I had seen. And I I remember leaving the movie theater when I saw his movie Loving, and just thinking, I didn't say it out loud, I just thought to myself, gosh, I would really love to work with this Jeff Nichols guy someday. I don't know him personally, but I love the way this guy tells a story. it's so rich. That's the kind of movies I want to work on. And so I kind of had that thought in my head for several days after that. And then to, you know, the way I came about being on George and Tammy and met Michael, that was all kind of, you know, serendipitous in and of itself. And then for that to then, you know, lead me into meeting Sarah and falling into this project. It really is interesting when you can look back on the stepping stones that led you to a particular day that kind of was a spotlight on your career, to say, oh, I can see where this one led me to this one, you know.
Yeah, 100%. And it's just, I don't know, when you're sort of talking to people as well, because you're sort of just discussing things, offhand, and when somebody kind of thinks about like trying to bring you in and are interested in sort of working with you again, that's like another big compliment for yourself. And because again, no one says anything, but you know you're doing a good job.
Absolutely. And also too, I think a lot of that is not, I mean, definitely what you bring to the table artistically, and you know, your technically and everything with your craft is going to be visible, you know, front and center on the screen. But also the way that you know, your work ethic and the way that you make people feel when you leave the room. I think all of that is very important to our, you know, our craft, because we're working so closely with not just the talent that's on camera, but with the, you know, the DPs and the camera operators and the wardrobe, you know, costume designers and the hair department and producers. And so I think it's a feeling of safety we all gravitate towards, you know, and once we get to a place where maybe we can pick and choose a little bit about who we'd like to work with, I think we all, as creatives and artists, kind of we gravitate towards those people who can bring us some peace in a very chaotic industry, and people that we know genuinely have our back and we're going to be, you know, taken care of. And so I think all of that together, like you were saying, just clicks with some people more so than it does with other people that we work with.
Yes, and I would love to be in a position to be able to pick and choose who you work with, because then you know that every day would be maybe not fun, because there is like the whole process of filmmaking is stressful in itself, but at least you know that you're going to be in the trenches with the right people, and you know that, you know what, no matter how bad it is, we're going to be all right.
Yeah, we were freezing to death half the time on this movie, and you know, the hours were really, really long, and pretty grueling with the temperatures some nights. But we were laughing a lot, and you know, having the people there, being able to bring in the team that I love working with so much, that I also knew could do the job, because it was, you know, a lot to ask of them. We left every day exhausted, but having the time of our life, and it was a lot of fun as well.
Just picking up on what you said in terms of like when you're working within your team and having those long hours and the low temperatures. As a HOD, how do you go about picking your team, but then also making sure that like you're maybe motivating might not be the right word, but making sure that you're all pulling in the right directions when it comes to those harder days and that morale doesn't sort of get too low.
Well, I knew for this one, for well, I'll say for each project, I kind of, you know, you read the script and you think about who everybody kind of has their strengths in, you know, different areas of the industry. I knew for Bikeriders that I wanted Megan Deputy to be my key makeup artist. She and I have worked on probably, I would say, 5 or 6 projects at this point together as department head and key. And so I know her work ethic. I know her skills level. You know, I knew that this would be a story and a project that would motivate her and energize her, as opposed to some people who maybe late nights on a freezing cold set, it's just not really something that's going to motivate them to do their best. And Megan and I, we travel well together. We know how to encourage one another. So she was the first person that I asked, and she was trying to kind of decide between another show and this show, where the other show she could have had, a better credit for her own resume, which I understood if she wanted to take that one. But deep down, I was really, really like hoping and praying that she said yes to coming and working with me. And having her say yes to this project meant that I could take a deep breath and really focus on the things that I needed to focus on as department head and designer, because I knew she would have my back every day. And then from there, Lindsay DeSarno, who was our third, she's probably one of the best makeup artists I've worked with, as far as facial hair application goes, and just kind of really making things look authentic and all of that. And her personality she's just so much fun, and she's very familiar with, everything and the set as a whole. So having the two of them come with me it took a big load off my shoulders. And then everyone else that we met locally that I hired on board were so talented and just kind of breaths of fresh air, that it all kind of worked together for the good for us on that one.
I'm always sort of curious to know how head of department builds their team, and how you obviously pick people for the right strengths for what they're going to be doing, especially for a film like this where it's period, and there's going to be certain aspects that you'll need to take extra consideration on. But then also when you mentioning about knowing that you're going to have someone who could pick something with better credit or your project, that probably is like puts you on edge a little bit to be like, please, 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 please work, please work, please work.
Yes, I would have been so happy for her taking that step in her career to kind of start building up in, credits on her resume as a makeup designer or a department head. So I knew that was a good opportunity for her and her career as well. I knew either one of these would have been great for Megan, but selfishly, I was hoping she would come, and say yes to Bikeriders with me, because she's such a comfort to me when we're working together, and we keep each other in good spirits. And she's just a really, really good makeup artist. She's very talented. And so yeah, you definitely have like the people at the top of your list that you kind of ask, and then you kind of work your way down a list. But it doesn't mean that you don't want or like the people that are in different places on your list. It just means that everybody has different strengths when it comes to their artistic craft. I have my strengths and definitely my weaknesses. So I never, I try really hard never to take it too personally if someone needs to ask someone else first, because maybe they're a better fit for the project. And all in all, we're trying to do right by these projects. And I wanted to present the best work and the best makeup that was possible to Jeff Nichols and this story that he was trying to tell. So being able to bring on the people that I could see, as being the strongest people for this project was very important.
Yeah, and with the shortlist, as you said, it's not about not working with people. It's just how you just have to think about who's going to be the best from one to whatever downwards. And I know that sounds quite harsh, but it's also just it's just about making sure that you as a department could deliver on what you're doing.
Yeah, definitely. You can't take it too personally, because these projects deserve to have the best people on them, and these cast members that you work with on projects, they deserve to have, to be taken care of properly too. And that can vary from project to project.
Yeah, exactly. Just to sort of go back to the project itself. I know, sorry for getting us sidetracked.
Okay.
Where did you begin in your research? Because the film's based on a book of photographs by Danny Lyon. And what I'm curious to know about is how much inspiration do you take from the photos, but then how much do you not want to sort of just do a sort of copy for copy of the photos and add your own spin to it as well?
Well, Danny's book was obviously our compass for this world that we were trying to dive into. Being that these were real people, you want to try to, you know, extract as much of that genuine personality from the pictures of each, you know, character. But then also I researched a lot of like album covers during the time to kind of see what was just kind of on trend in general for that time period. I also researched a lot of newspaper clippings that were online of like social and political strains and you know, issues that were going on in the country, you know, in America at that time, just to kind of wrap my head around and really get a grasp on what society was going through as a country in general at that time. And it kind of helped me understand a little bit more of why these bike clubs even existed and why there was a need for a place for these quote unquote outcasts and rebels to find community in, you know. And so understanding as much as I could and really seeing visually as many images as I could as to what our country was going through during that decade, it kind of, or not kind of, it did, it really helped me maybe understand more about these aren't just bad boys looking for, you know, a place to race their bikes. These are actual people that were searching for community. And yeah, they had their own style, but at the heart of it all, it was a lifestyle for them because of other areas of society that kind of casted them out. And so wearing, you know, looking at all of the photos from the costume designer Erin Bannock's you know, designs and clothing that she was going to be putting them all in, which were so incredible, I was able to kind of take a turn from her images and what each character was going to be put in and just expand outward from that, you know, those clothes that they were going to be wearing and those costumes out into the rest of, you know, their makeup, kind of the dust and the grime and all of that, and why it was so important to make sure that these guys looked like they were living in this environment. They weren't just pretending this was who they were.
There's a lot to sort of take out from that because it's quite. I find it fascinating that not just the book itself is using as a guide point, but it's the whole geopolitical landscape and everything else that's happening at the time in the research, because you could probably pick certain aspects of time during it that you can see how much is being changed in the country and what's being different, what people's styles are like, what music people are into as well. And also the fact that you talk about community as well and how important this community was for them. Because again, as you said, it's like the community aspect as well as like how it's not just about people riding bikes and being these sort of like bike riders. They want to be a group. They want to be their own family.
They do. They were looking for a family, and a lot of them, they were just kind of on their own and this was their family. And so yes, the style, you know, was kind of born from that, you know, rebellious maybe attitude or whatever, but it was also internally what were they going through and what were they feeling or living to make them, you know, be willing to live in this, you know, environment that they were in day to day as an actual lifestyle.
Yeah, and I think there's one thing that was very interesting that I think I read in another interview that you did was the sort of dust that would flick up onto them whilst they're riding because they're not riding with helmets like you would today, which as a producer I'd probably be ripping my hair out regarding the insurance of this film, knowing that all your main stars are riding bikes without helmets. But it's the aspect of like the dust that people would get on their face whilst riding, which as like myself, I'd never think about something like that. But as a makeup designer, how do you go about making sure that you can incorporate that sort of look into the film, but then also the continuity of it so that So it doesn't appear before they ride, it appears sort of after they ride.
Yeah, mapping everything out, scene by scene is incredibly important. It's absolutely necessary for any film that you're going to be working on. Break your script down every scene by scene, make sure that your continuity is lining up with the dates and the times, the nights and the days of the script supervisor and everyone else. But just kind of knowing that, like you said, these guys don't ride with helmets. They're riding all day long. For me as a makeup artist, that just seemed like an element that they could never quite get rid of 100%. It's like even when they were at their cleanest, or when they're trying to kind of spiffy up a little bit, they're never quite rid of this ever present kind of grime and grease that just lives with them. It's a part of them. And I think they kind of wear that, like their leather jackets and their club colors as a badge of honor. But they also, it's not something that they're really stopping to wipe off. And I think they're okay with that. But yeah, just making sure that if we're starting a ride, they've also been pretty much probably riding all day long. So they could have some on them, but just, yeah, continuity and the photos that we have to take and, keep up with and everything to make sure that the dirt's not moving around all over their face, every time the camera looks at them. It's a little tricky, but, that's part of the job. It's a huge part of our job. So we really take it seriously and try to make sure every frame by frame that it's matching.
Again, if I was in your position, I'd probably be ripping my hair out, making sure that's matching frame by frame. But then also as like real life, knowing that you're always covered in that sort of muck, that'd probably drive me crazy as well, not being able to clean off little bits and bobs. But that's also just that's the lifestyle people will be living. But I guess as well, like it's probably more of a credit to the craft of your team, of you and your team, is the sort of continuity of it, and knowing that it's always going to be part of their makeup, that they will have that sort of dusty look to them, especially if they're constantly riding or going from place to place. I feel like
Yeah,
that's like
definitely. One of the first conversations I had with my team once we were all, there together was just it needs to kind of always be there. It needs to look like it's just kind of always there. So I don't want to have there shouldn't really be a scene where they look perfect and fresh and clean. Again, like I said earlier, like even when they're at their cleanest, it still needs to look like it's there some.
I can just again imagine being like, yeah, just had the perfect shower, and it's like you've missed a speck or something. Um, Especially like with the actors as well, because some of them are so handsome, it's just like trying to dirt them up.
I
Um,
know.
yeah, I guess that's like another thing as well. Like when you do have such handsome actors, making sure that you can dirt them up, but then still make them look good for screen.
I think
Um,
these guys loved it. All of them loved it. They really embraced kind of that scruffiness. I think a lot of them are used to being, so handsome and kind of the dreamy, clean cut, guy, leading man or whatever in each of these in the roles that they've done in the past. And I think for this one, they were excited every day, when they came in, especially when we started doing makeup tests and trying the looks out and the dirt and the grime and grease and, dirtying up some of their teeth and everything. I think they were into it. They thought it was a lot of fun. I think they really felt like they felt cool. They felt like they were really, a part of this world. And you could kind of tell they felt pretty cool about it, once they were in their makeup and wardrobe.
I guess as like someone who probably looks that good and has their teeth look pristine, and I think it's probably like another way of like looking in the mirror of like how I wonder how I would look if I just had my teeth a little bit busted up, or if that I had a bit more sort of uncleanliness to myself.
Right.
I guess it's like another window to sort of go into and see like what if. But yeah, what I'm curious to know about as well is the tattoo work on the film. Now, I think with like in this sort of day and age, I think we're very used to seeing tattoos on people, and a lot of and you probably can associate people's style with who they've gone with like tattoo artists, or if they were done in prison, for example, or homemade tattoos. But when you're doing a film, a period film where maybe tattoos weren't so prevalent in the society, where do you begin with your research on that? And then how do you go about making the right looks for those tattoos as well, so that it would be like a homemade DIY style to them as well?
Well, I started with the original images from Danny Lyon's book and tried to find some of the pictures of the real people and what they had on them to see if I could make out any of them. But some of the photos are very clear, but a lot of them you can make out that there's some ink there, but you can't quite really tell what it is. So just really dissecting the characters in the story and trying to see what what would they have on them as like markings when this club is going out into the world. What kind of signs and symbols are they going to want to present to the rest of the world? And so I worked with makeup artist Christian Tinsley on the tattoos because Christian is really, really incredible at tattoo work. He's kind of known for that, along with a million other things. But his tattoos, the creations that he can come up with and that he can make into transfers are so realistic looking. It's just, kind of the best out there. And so I would email him images, sketches of mine, ideas, thoughts, a little bit of a breakdown of each character to kind of say, this is what I feel this person would have. This is what I feel this person would have this image here of this person, and it looks like he has this, but it could possibly be this. And then I would talk to Jeff about it and say, I can't really make out what some of these words are or images. What are some things that you definitely don't want on screen? What are some things that you feel like are absolute no-goes for tattoos? And so he definitely would sign off on, have the final say in everything. But just working with Christian was such an honor. I've always been such a huge fan of his work. So to have him come along for this one and help me design tattoos for this project was a huge honor for me. And we just kind of together broke down these characters, and I had to do measurements on all the cast and measure their arms and their length and width and everything, just so I can kind of figure out what sizes were needed for each of their arms or chest pieces, and send those off to Christian. And so pretty much any ink that the guys had when they came in was too modern. It wasn't stuff that would have been on anyone back then. A couple of our guys had full sleeve tattoos, which the guys just didn't have back then. And so all of that obviously had to be covered up before we could even apply the ones that were period appropriate and Jeff approved. So the makeup artist Jody Byrne, who was our fourth on the film, she had me write out a couple in like handprint, different kind of different handprint writings for the ones that we wanted to look like self-made, self-given, homemade tattoos. And she made those for me on a tattoo maker that she had. So it was a bit of a process, but it's great for those of us like in this creative world. This is the stuff we live for. I mean, it was exhilarating to get to design and help create and customize these markings that were going to be on some of Jeff Nichols' characters, so that the viewer could feel like they were involved in this story. I mean, it just doesn't get better than that. It was a real, more than a pleasure. It was an honor for me, definitely.
the whole sort of tattoo process is just a very like if you spoke to sort of like Joe Blogs down the street with saying that you needed to cover somebody up with their tattoos to put new tattoos on, they'd probably think, what? Surely you've already like some of it's already there, so you don't need to worry about it. But it's the details of like the sleeve tattoos, or as you said, the type of ink that might be used, or even if they have color tattoos, would ruin the sort of take people out of the film. But even the going from like the process of picking them out, thinking what would this character do? How would you break it down? I find that very interesting as well because even though characters you think of actors and how they portray them on screen, but it's all the glue that gets brought together for that performance as well.
Yeah, even the background extras. I mean, everyone in that's on screen was living in this decade, so all of the background extras tattoos had to be covered because any background extras that we had at the bike rallies or the car shows in the movie, when we had like 200 people, 300 people, everything had to be covered up before we could even think about applying tattoos for, background members of the bike gang or whatever. It just, that kind of thing, if it's not covered or replaced with something period appropriate, it can take the viewer very quickly out of the decade. And I mean, if you see somebody with like a mid 90s tribal tattoo or, something like that, like they're going to be like, well, that was not obviously a part of, the designs of tattoos. And a lot of times it was too like where people had them, the placement of the tattoos were different back then. So that was tattoos were a huge part of not only, creating ones for the bike riders, but also covering anything that would take the viewer out of the time period.
And again, if you are taken out of it, then it's not that you've lost a viewer, but it's also just it ruins this experience in a way as well. But then there's also hats off to yourself and the team for being able to put that detail in and understand what needs to go through it all and how important even something like placement is with it all.
Yes, definitely.
I'm just curious as well to talk about Norman Reedus' character and his transformation because even though he's always had that sort of long hair and facial hair. But he kind of does look quite unrecognizable in the film. And especially when you see those busted teeth as well, where if you ever wanted to tell kids, make sure you brush, floss, and look after your teeth, I think that's the sort of image that I would show them. But when it came to creating that look and then incorporating false teeth, how do you go about doing something like that? And how difficult is it for getting the right set of teeth for the character?
Yeah, his teeth were definitely a dental hygiene PSA for for the youth. But there was a gentleman in Paris, close by, where Norman was filming at the time. He had a project going on while we were prepping for Bikeriders. And he was able to, this guy, and I feel horrible because I cannot remember his name at the moment. He kind of does this as his own craft and artwork. And he was able to, get Norman to come into the office, get measured, get a mold made so that then they could be sent off to the right people in Hollywood to start creating this, set of dentures basically that he could wear on top of his real teeth. So it was a little tricky with the time difference, us being in Cincinnati where we were filming and Norman being in Paris. And then also the lady that hand sewed the beard that I had made for Norman, she was in London. So trying to work with different time zones and his schedule and their schedules, and then me in Cincinnati, my schedule, and then the guy in LA that was going to be completing everything to then get it back to us in Cincinnati. It was tricky, but it was a fun part of getting him worked through because he was willing to go that route. You know, pretty much his idea, from what I've heard him in other interviews say, that he really wanted to go that direction with Funny Sonny look. And we had a couple photos of the real Funny Sonny from Danny Lyon's book, and his teeth were really messed up and they just were not taken care of at all. And so since that kind of was already something fun, the real Funny Sonny was known for, Norman, you know, again, saying how much these guys embraced this, you know, kind of grease and grime element to these roles, he really kind of jumped in and wanted to make sure his teeth looked really bad. And then the facial hair just added to him being, you know, kind of unrecognized when he rolls up on the screen. And he loved it. I mean, he just kind of really wanted to embrace kind of that dirty, grimy character that Funny Sonny in real life was.
I think as well, like when you have those sort of people in the film industry that do those specialist jobs like the teeth, and I always find that really funny because it's just like when people talk about like the glitz and glamour of filmmaking, it's like, what do you do? It's like, oh, I make the fake teeth and do those sort of roles. But then also as like you're working over different time zones to make sure that everything runs smoothly. I again dread to think if something was wrong and you don't see it for a few hours and then you get
Oh
back to it
yeah,
a bit late, then it's just yeah, I'd hate that.
it can be stressful. You know, you're kind of at the mercy of FedEx and UPS and just hoping everything that you paid to be overnighted, or you know, you're just hoping it all gets to where it's supposed to go, and you're watching the tracking of every, you know, every pair of sideburns that I had made for the movie, or every beard, or every, you know, the set of teeth or tattoos. You're kind of just hoping and praying that, you know, you've done your part, and you just hoping and praying that you know, the male gods will do their part and everything will arrive when it's supposed to.
I honestly don't. The idea of like postal service, UPS, all
Oh,
those people, even if it's coming from overseas, like the anxiety that must have created as well. I just please, just don't turn up late. This is so important. Just yeah, I couldn't deal with that. I've just got a couple more questions left, and what I'm also curious to know about is like not scarring makeup, but it's more of like the after effects of fighting makeup, of how do you go about making sure that there's enough seen on someone's face that it looks like they've been in a fight, but then once it's healing as well, that it's either that you can show signs of healing, but then also you still want to exuberate the bruises. How do you make sure that you don't go a bit too far with how that looks and getting the sort of balance right for it?
well, specifically with Austin, we did a couple stages of makeup tests with the healing of his black eye and his bruising and, you know, swollen eyelid. And so just kind of getting my own idea of what it needed to look like visually. So like you said, it shows up on camera, but not to where it's so much that it just looks fake or you know, not believable. And so just really working right alongside with Jeff and the DP when we're on the day to make sure that, you know, everything is, we're kind of all on the same page. Because sometimes you can do the makeup exactly the way you want it, but then you get them out in front of the camera and you're looking on the monitor, and the way that the lighting is, or the way the camera angle is set up, you're not really seeing what you just did, or it's coming across as too much or too little. So you have to jump in and make some adjustments. But trying to add into your schedule and to your prep time some time to map out the healing process of any particular injury, so that not only you but your actor knows that on the day when it's going to be time to go in front of the camera, it's all been looked at, it's all been photographed, everybody has approved it, and so everyone knows kind of where you are and what's going to happen. But just continuity, you know, making sure this one was tricky because we weren't just shooting the scenes out of sequence. The scenes themselves were going back and forth between like the years. And so working closely with the script supervisor to make sure he and I were on the same, in the same decade at the same time. And, you know, just paying a lot of attention to the continuity and reading the scenes, reading them again, reading them for a third time, just making sure that everything that we've kind of like blocked out for each scene also is flowing with everyone else's continuity, because it is a team effort, and it's easy to think a little bit, you know, you might be a little later in a day and actually you're a little earlier or whatever. So just kind of working together to make sure that what you think that healing process is accurate. And then I just research a lot of real injuries. I have medical books that I look at. I look online. It can get a pretty grotesque, but you just kind of have to deal with that part because it is helpful with the you know, the research is helpful with the project. But just looking at what real injuries look like. What does a black eye or busted eyelid look like 2 weeks after it's been injured? What does it look like a month after it's been injured? What does it look like immediately after? You know, and then that way you can kind of use those references along with, you know, your continuity notes to make sure that your actor's going to look appropriate.
So going through the medical books, as you said, you have to just go through it. But I bet you there's sort of moments where you're just like, oh, this is disgusting. I'll save this one for later because I know it's going to come up more.
Absolutely. It's really gross yet really fun at the same time. Um, if you're doing gunshot wounds, you know, it's like, okay, well, what you need to know what kind of firearm they're using and at what range did they get shot. So was there an exit wound? Is there not an exit wound? You know, so like different firearms create different, you know, shotgun wounds. And so looking at that is very is very gross sometimes, but incredibly helpful. And yeah, I have a lot of really gross photos saved for future references if I need them.
Yeah. Oh, uh, that's, I would hate to sort of like if somebody finds them, like, what on earth is this? But then also you're mentioning about like gunshots, you know, if you have a shotgun, you got like the buckshot or the duck shots. I think that's what it's called. And you're saying as well, like the distance. Yeah, amazing. It's like these are the little sort of details that you just have to constantly just sort of pull out and think about how it would look.
Yeah.
There's also something I wanted to bring up as well is about the continuity side of like going through the decades because you talk about working with the script supervisor. What's a collaboration like that like? Because I know you've mentioned about working with Jeff, the director, and sort of discussions of that. I can imagine discussions with the hair side is like you're all going to be pulling in the same direction. But what's it like when it's you're talking with the script supervisor and thinking about the continuity of the scene?
Well, the script supervisors normally will send you their own breakdown, like they'll send it to everybody, you know, all the department heads, so that each department, to kind of start the process of all of us being on the same page. And so, but Jean-Paul Schrecky, who is the script supervisor for Bikeriders, he's probably one of the best ones I've ever worked with, ever, in the 17 years that I've been doing this. Not only because of the things that he could see and pick out and make sure was right on the monitor, but as far as his openness and willingness to just discuss any questions and go through any questions that anyone from any other department had. He wants you to ask him questions. He would rather you ask so that you can confirm that you're on the right page or that everything looks properly than to feel like you can't ask or say anything and then it be a huge continuity problem. And so he was so open to conversation, and we sat down several days before, you know, during prep before we ever started filming, just to say, okay, I feel like this would be night 3 instead of night 2. And he would kind of explain to me as to why it would be a different day or night in the script instead. And his openness and willingness and just intelligence, I could never be a script supervisor. Like, that is just, my brain does not work like that. And his willingness to share any of his notes and just to make sure that that this project was going to come out the absolute best that it could. You could feel the love that he had for the project by the way that he was so willing to just help ensure that everyone was on the right page. And watching him work along with the camera assistants and everything to make sure that they were on the proper scene and all of that, he was very respectful. And so my experience with him was incredible. And for the most part, I will say most of the time, script supervisors are very generous in ensuring, kind of making sure that everybody's on the same page. Once in a while, you might have, work with a script supervisor that their personality is just not really as open. But I would say that they're definitely one of the key people that you need to try to get along with, because they can be extremely helpful, and they're kind of a one man or one woman band. It's just them, and they're noticing everything. So all of that information is very helpful to each department.
Okay. I'm just picturing them, the script supervisor, just having that a completely like jumbled mess of notes. It's like
Oh,
I think it's like the gif of Charlie from Always Sunny being like having it all
yes.
there, being like, this is day two, this is why you need to do it on this day, this is what's going on here. This is the transition to here.
Yeah, I could never do it. It's Godspeed to all of the script supervisors, because it would not be a job that I could handle.
Yeah, and also the like just how much prep and understanding you need to know of what you're doing. Yeah, hats off to them. Just to wrap this episode up, with my final question, what was your favorite look to create?
I think my favorite look was probably Kathy, and Jodie Comer, who plays Kathy. She's one of the only feminine elements to the story. It's it's a man's world that she's kind of living in this film. And Jodie herself she's very, very beautiful. She's very naturally beautiful. Her features are really stunning. And so it's easy for her to go glamorous very quickly. And so trying to tone that down a little bit, tone down that beauty a little bit, but still embrace Jodie was a little tricky. And I think at the beginning, I was trying to force Jodie into Kathy as the real Kathy a little too much. And it kind of wasn't working at first. So once I was willing to stop kind of forcing that to happen and just embrace Jodie's beauty, play it down a little bit, because I didn't want her to look glamorous, but just kind of embrace the features that she has and the presence that she could naturally bring to this, world of all these men. It really started to come together. But she was a lot of fun to work with in general. She and Austin were both just so lovely. But I loved Kathy because I wanted it to seem, she's a little more fresh faced when we see her at the beginning of the movie. And then when she's a year or so into it, she doesn't really have much makeup on. She's kind of barely got her hair fixed. She's just kind of hanging in there and trying to figure out what she's doing in this world, and always chasing after this husband of hers. And so using makeup as something that a tool for herself was a lot of fun. And my favorite scene of hers that I did her makeup for was when she went to confront Johnny about, wanting Benny to quit the club. And that was because I wanted to do, and I made sure Jodie was okay with this, and Jeff, but I wanted her to have a little bit more makeup on, a little bit more of a face on than we had seen her during that time frame or that time period, because I feel like a lot of times women in general, but especially maybe Kathy in that scene, could have used makeup as a tool and a little bit of a confidence boost and a shield, and kind of remind herself, I'm a woman and I deserve better than this, but also as kind of a mask to kind of maybe hide a little bit of any nervousness or anxiousness that she may have had to confront him. So that one, I wanted her to look very put together, so she could say, this is me, and I'm a woman, and I have something to say. And I think makeup, especially back in that time, in that decade, was really, could be used to make a statement of who she was as a female in this basically all men environment.
I think there's a very good way of as well in like storytelling is the details of how the makeup's going to work. As you said, that there's showing stuff over time and how someone's going to embrace that lifestyle. It's like, how is that going to work and how they're going to look? So if they're going to be on the road all the time, are they always going to look like they're going to the Oscars in how they look? And then there's also, does one want to put the effort in? Do you just want to keep it as like whatever's most simple and best for where you are at that moment in time?
Yeah, it's a real deep dive that we all take to kind of get the inner backstory and the inner levels of emotion that characters are going through, for us to then pull from that to then create what's on the outside. Because so much of what we're going through internally is shown externally on us, and vice versa. So much of what's going on externally in our world is affecting us internally. So the two do coexist. And so I feel like if if there's a way to make that show through something even as simple as the makeup that they're putting on their face, then I think that that can only benefit a story. But it's real nerdy stuff. Like, we really dive deep into this stuff and get into the psyche of all these characters. But that's what makes, me as an artist feel very alive and feel like I can contribute to art, and contribute to these stories that I am so blessed to get to work on.
I think that's a beautiful way and a brilliant way to end the episode. Ashleigh, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
Bikeriders is still in cinemas at the moment, but I think it's out on VOD quite soon. I think it might be tomorrow, so the 8th of July. Ashleigh, thank you again so much for your time.
Thank you.
You take care and bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast.